Russians, Italians, all these had this in their creed. You know. Interestingly enough, the very word slave, that's very interesting, is a derivation of the word, of a Slovak tribe which has been overrun for many years by Germanic people. That's who brought the term to the fore, slave. And now we tend to almost synonymous. Slave means Negro, which is a fairly recent phenomenon, modern time. That's what most people associate slavery with. That reinforces all, I think, our racial ideology of this country. So the church in this country almost unanimously endorsed slavery, and we see the legacy of it now in the segregation states, so-called, the jure states. We hear people, you can see that philosophy, the depth of it when they talk about, when you begin to challenge injustice in the society, what do the churchmen generally do? And I think we can remember this, and this in our lifetime. They said, no, Coolidge, they plead for gradualism and understanding of not so much the people who are suffering from bias, but the perpetuators of it. You must understand them.
How do you interpret the $500 million demand, and how do you see the church responding to this?
I was surprised that one church, I think it's appropriate. I've always been in favor of reparation. And if you're going to settle this question politically, whether you call it reparation or whatever, that some form of repayment of some kind, in mass, has to be. People have asked for it before in very subtle ways, like Whitney Young was talking about domestic Marshall Plan. Same thing. You call it any rose by any other name, remains the same. It smells just as sweet. You call it anything you want. But reparation is the answer, and I know that certainly does not make sense to white people. I saw an argument in the Wall Street Journal say this is utterly ridiculous to indict white persons for, modern day white persons. But nobody's talking about modern day white persons, That is the whole problem. It's institutional. Slavery was an institution. It was created by the government of this country. You're talking about governments, primarily, when you talk about reparation and then people's relationship to it. Reparation is defined by international law as repayment for crimes committed against one's ancestors. And if this slavery wasn't a crime, then I don't know what a crime is.
And the church supported the institution.
Yes, I'm saying they let the first slave. So you can't even divorce it. But people would say that thing, well, that could never work. Because what are you going to do about the Africans who participated in the slave trade? You see, that's a very fallacious argument. Because Africans had almost nothing to do with the institutionalization of slavery in the Western world. And let us assume that Africans, let's assume that Africans took Africans and brought them to Europe. It's silly. We still got to account for the impropriety of Europeans. You have to deal with people like Queen Elizabeth, the profiteers who invested in it, the people who set up the legal and political apparatus, of slavery, not Africans, and this is what you're dealing with. The focus has to be central. You can almost dispute any argument and say the Germans were responsible for what happened in Germany, but who do you focus on? The regime. Obviously. Other people made contributions. It is the government, the most powerful force. And that's what people are talking about, not the American people.
It's interesting that they chose Riverside Church, a very kind of prestigious church. Mm-hmm. And it's always prided itself on being interracial.
Yeah.
And this was the church that James Forman came into and kind of symbolized the start of this.
Yeah. Well, that's the question. William L. Patterson got the case. William L. Patterson is a black man, very old now, who wrote We Charge Genocide. It's about 25 or 30 years ago now. People, she can write William L. Patterson off because of the fact that he was once a socialist. In the height of, when a lot of people in this country flirted with socialism. So you generally discredit, but he wrote it about 25 years ago, the strongest case we had. And the whole question of many people have gone to the United Nations on the Declaration of Human Rights. Many, but they can't get any nation to sponsor it against the United States, obviously. That was one of Malcolm X's last, attempts, actually, to get this whole question on the Declaration of Human Rights, where it belongs, just like other nations. But, all these contradictions, in our society, we can't see it because of racism. People don't see slavery as a crime. They don't understand the relationship of people to authority. The authority doesn't necessarily help you do what you want to do. It can keep you from doing what you want to do. And that's the essence of the relationship of black and white people to authority in this country. It helps whites do what they want to do, and it keeps blacks from doing what they want to do. Any institution. That's the only what you get, communism, whatever you want to call it. It does one of two things. You just can't get away from it. That's the whole question. This is what Jefferson was talking about. You have no right to exist in any government that's not instituted for the benefit of men, of us. But it's not. Our government's not instituted for the benefit of people. We say that about communism. But a whole lot of folks are very much satisfied with communism. Why? That'll be obvious. The members of the party dig it. Because it helps them do what they want to do. And I suppose this is basic, human failure. We just don't understand. So I was, saying how the church, led the first leg internationally in this country. We can see the greatest defenders of our way of life has been, the church, really. The greatest critics in the early days, the change of Martin Luther King were ministers from all over the nation. This famous letter from Birmingham. That was ridiculous. Acting like, planes, taking this thing about Jesus seriously. And they jumped all on him. I mean, predominantly white clergymen from all over the country. You must be insane talking about violation of your conscience and this kind of stuff. The mystical body of Christ and what Jesus would have done. They thought it was insane. They defended those people's way. Let us defend and understand those who cherish the word nigger. Take it easy, churchmen said. That's to me, that's racism. That's a manifestation of racism. All of these things that we see, this legacy, the doctors, doctors think the Hippocratic Oath is for Caucasians only. That's racism. You got two separate groups of doctors in there. I don't know, what is it? The big white one is AMA, is that it? And the black one is M something. I don't know what it is. But there are a few smattering of tokenism. That's a glaring contradiction. You see it in every walk of American life, on every shade, whether, like bus drivers, dishwashers, doctors, lawyers, ministers, judges. Racism is a fact of American life. And until people begin to understand it, we're not going to do anything about reaching solutions. Because solutions depend on accurate definitions or accurate descriptions of problems. You see, one of the functions, again, of authority is really to the organizations to legitimate reality. That's one of the basic functions of authority. And what this country, the serious trouble of this country, institutions at the end of the day, is that public opinion is very much informed. You can't deal with, you include some of the people some of the time. And that has always been the case. You can see that whole stream throughout the last 2,000 years of history, particularly where Western man is concerned. The whole question of organization and authority being challenged by new realities. That's what brought the Christian church into being. And for a long time it was monolithic until it was challenged by Reformation. And what they were talking about, of course, is that you describe things. Like the church for a long time had a tremendous grip on what was real in the world. You see. Now this is yesterday I'm talking about, in historical time. What was real in this life, what people accepted as real, intelligent people. Because they had supposedly, we always assumed that people who are in high places have a corner on knowledge. That is not true. necessarily. They always have a weakness. And as one wit has put it, the wisdom always comes from those on the wings of society. You might have knowledge, which means to know something, understanding, which means to grasp something, but only those who can apply wisdom to the wings of society, people outside. And that's what Christianity was like. And it became, like literally overthrew the Roman Empire. That's the way I interpret it. And they became the central authority for defining what was real. Until, of course, the great heretical explosion of science, heresy. Remember the Inquisition. All these people were, of course, we accept science. Now, do we not? It benefited us tremendously, but it had a struggle coming into being. It took 1,500 years for science to emerge as a reality in human life. Because they were what? Heretics, right? It was heretical. All of, about Galileo and Bruno. The church said a lot of things. They said the earth, the reality was, and we can understand it, the earth was, science said the earth was spherical and the church said it was flat. And, no matter what the church said, it was nevertheless spherical. It was spherical before and after it was defined. The reality already existed, but the church had the power to define. So it was flat. They said, the science said it moves, it rotates on its axis. And the church said it was motionless. Nevertheless, it moved. The church claimed that the earth was the center of the solar plexus, and science, of course, said we talked about the heliocentric concept of the sun. Science claimed the theory of evolution, that man evolved from early organic matter, and the church, of course, would refute the whole question of divine creation growing out of, Adam. The same kind of argument. I mean, that's a graphic example. This is relatively new in the world. And people burn at stake and all these kinds of things. I think we face this same kind of reality. I mean, the same kind of struggle over the description of things, over the description of existence. In language, is a very, it derives its eloquence from the tradition of the users of the language, and also its ability to define. That's very important, language, which a lot of people in this country really know how to use and have great command of. But most American people have no profound understanding of the spoken word. I don't believe with psychological implications. Because the same way, if one has tremendous command of language, this is what all the great dictators and conquerors meant by the word being more powerful than the sword. That indeed you can, anybody can make anything real if he has sufficient command of the language. All he has to do is express it in that language, in such a way. I am rich. Therefore, I'm rich. You may not be rich. And I'm healthy. And people, it's like, like ghosts and demons and all these things that are kind of, people accept as a reality. It's a part of their inner world. But it is not real, you see. The whole thing that we're going on through now with the racial struggle is very comparable to that. People define a lot of things that really don't exist. People, because we have the words, have been defined by certain use of the language, like the whole thing of racism and segregation and integration and separatism and black power. See, we have one frame of reference and one attitude about all these things defined by people. Naturally, how could any black power be anything but bad? That would have been impossible for it to have been seen as a positive thrust. And it's given the context of our language, and that's something I didn't say hardly anything about the literature and the development of how people use symbolism, devil theories, concepts, and languages. That people like Moby Dick Man dealt with, Milton. So we are, I think we're at the crossroads now of people challenging really the legitimacy of authority.
Would you say, Milton, that every one of our major institutions is right at the edge now?
Right.
Including the church.
Yeah, all of them. Because what happens, all institutions or organizations, whether it's church, school, or whatnot, is number one, I think, concerned about its survival. It's concerned about its fellowship, and have to project images that will bring about a response, reciprocity from its, support from its fellowship. And all too frequently, organizations, develop a style that one writer called organizational line that you lie. And a few people, and see this abdicates, people, individuals don't assume any responsibility for this lying morally, because the way they lie turns out to be self-sacrifice, loyalty to the organization. Like you're not lying, you're supporting the organization. Like the great unselfish patriot. My country right or wrong kind of thing. You defend lies in favor of the organization. That's a real problem in this country.
Instead of the ethic.
Yeah, the ethic. But you don't feel any responsibility for it personally, because the organization sets the rules and it's reinforcing that, and that's where we are now. A lot of people in this country understand organizational lying. I think particularly since the what is that thing that we're talking about, the credibility gap, which has always been there. It was a tremendous revelation to some people. We were wondering, particularly black people, always.
Now even the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's gonna. This is a whole new thing. I think it's gonna happen. But what is happening in this country? People could have a purge just like they do in Russia and get away with it. And I think that's what's about to happen in this country. What could happen in another country you would call a purge? Just get rid of those elements that might, raise some embarrassing questions. So you can go ahead, because it's impossible. If there's a takeover in this country, people always talk about the left. That's another phony argument. All the people that I've read who studied revolutions know that the only takeover possible in this country is a fascist one. It's from the top down. But the attention has to be given that the real threat is supposed to be the leftists, and it's highly improbable that they could ever take over this country.
You gotta have an enemy.
Yeah, the enemy. But the people who are likely to do it, they can do it very easily through the purges. And you won't call them purges because you fought us, and they say this guy crook, and this and get all these guys out of here. And that's the way it's done. That's the way they do another government. They're not loyal. They're not patriotic. You're saying the same thing that communists say, and what they did about Stalin, de-Stalinization. I think you can have that in this country. But most people be supporting what we call nationalism, which is a major thrust in the world today, and secular thought, not religious thought. That's the problem. Secular thought began to win over religious thought, with the development of modern states in Europe. We all secularized as much as. Now, that doesn't say that people aren't any more religious people. I don't mean that they're spiritual people. But most people are more secular. It ain't got nothing to do with Karl Marx, because it hadn't been for Karl Marx. Industrialization brings this. I think it would have happened in Russia anyway, without it being officially defined as an anti-religious state. Many people in this country are anti-religious, in the sense, if I know what religion means, if I understand, I can't define it really, I can give some perceptions of it, is that it is communion with ultimate values. I mean, it is kind of, I think that's what science is all about, and I think that's what, to me, anyway, that there is a kind of unity between religion and science in this sense, a unity of opposites. They both deal with ultimate value. I think that science, in a sense, can be religion, and religion is really, I don't care how you define it anyway, it has had this kind of impact on culture. It's something to be taken seriously. And I think anything is taken seriously, it's supposed to be religion. Folks in this country don't take certainly not church seriously. It's a ritual. It's the thing that you just go through. It's habit. But I think, religion, a lot of people are anti-religious in the sense that we don't take very much seriously. People like me who consider themselves religious in that sense, you have some high law, you don't go to church. I mean, you heard people, we use it all the time. People say he did so-and-so religiously, meaning that he's honest and earnest, serious about what he's doing. And I think that's enough to be religious. in religious people's lives, you find fewer contradictions than you do in other people's lives. That's another thing. You find that's like a fundamentalist. There's just few. That's why they have fewer contradictions in their lives.
Yeah. The point. Are institutions on the edge? On the edge of what exactly?
Well, I would say on the edge of being destroyed. We
Yeah.
know it.
Or reform.
Reform
Reform is probably unlikely. You have to. You probably have to have something tantamount to.
And I'm not saying what would destroy them. I
Yeah.
mean, some would collapse in and of
Yeah,
themselves.
yeah. I think living social forces, such as what happened to the church, will just overrun obsolete institutions. Will just overrun people. The church is going to be over. I think church, as we've known it, you can forget it. In the next 2-3 decades, you just won't resemble anything, whatever church will be.
I agree. From what I've noticed in history, the history books that I read about institutions, that they've been destroyed from within before any destruction came from without. This included almost every institution that's ever.
Is that right? I don't know that to be consistent. It probably is. I know.
It's not consistent to be a general rule of thumb more than anything else.
I said, sure. I think that you have to have, the Reformation, of course, was internal and external. Was just you have to have that. I think you have to have some revolt within institutions.
The credibility gap in America is over what we're doing, not over what somebody else is doing.
Right.
It's over our selective service system, our continual involvement in Vietnam.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And
our priorities that we're setting nationally.
and then since institutions are out to perpetuate themselves, and they grow out a certain set of conditions. So this is why if they don't renew themselves and reform periodically to relate to the needs and the chemistry of the time, then you tend to promote reformation or revolt of some kind. It's obvious in America, that the society has changed so drastically, so radically in such a short period of time, man. People don't realize that. It's just yesterday. The whole physical environment has been transformed overnight. And most people try to relate, at least in a ritualistic way, to a lifestyle which is no longer reality in terms of values and all of these things about parent-child relationship, all these things, authority relating to its constituents, say, it's a profound effect on people. And I think it's general and pervasive, and institutions haven't been able to keep up with it. Sociologists got a word, they call it social lag,
Do you sense that the ingredients for self-renewal are in the institutions of America as you look at them?
I think they're outside. They're always, well, not always. I think, the creative forces for renewal are not within institutions. Otherwise, they would be able to do it, pull it off. What happens is, let's see what Arnold Toynbee, of course, is, he talks about, sources of renewal, people in the wings of society, institutions don't know how to plug in. That's how they are able to sustain and revive themselves. Because you see, like I was talking about wisdom, the assumption is that people in authority, have cornered the market on knowledge and understanding. That is not true. There are a lot of things that people in authority are afraid of simply because they can't deal with it because they don't understand it. They don't deal with it. What they have to deal with primarily is definitions of what they understand. But, people in authority have what they call tunnel vision, and people in the wings have peripheral vision, I think. Because, they have to see that way. And they see different things in society. They see different things about the human experience that some people can't afford to see. That's going to be a real question in the next few years about intellectual life in this country, when you see more and more people intellectually challenge what we call knowledgeable people. You're going to see a lot of that. Folks, really did their thing, really have done it. Not only theoretically, but out of practice and experience, which of course is best. Got to challenge people. You got to challenge people who are looked upon as authority. Say, well, he knows because he has a PhD and 5 other degrees. That's got to stop. That's just not true. People with PhDs and 5 degrees are very important. no question about it. But also other people who have invested some time and whatnot and understanding the experiences which they've been involved in. There's nothing new about that. It's as old as the Christian church movement, at least that old. And it would happen time and time again. Labor people are a good example. I think we're talking about something a little, in a sense, less politicized, but to challenge authority. That's what has to be done before you can have any renewal, before you can have any regeneration, before you can have any such thing as self-discovery and identity. And these are the questions that are being raised.
It's very helpful to as far as challenging someone forward. I think in order for a change or reformation to come about, it has to be more than just challenge. Unfortunately, it seems like you still need
Oh yes. I was just mentioning this as one aspect on the intellectual level. I think challenges are coming. You got political challenges right now. The political struggle is being heightened every day.
Can there be a revolution without violence?
Or I think it's a possibility, an extremely remote one.
In an ideal state.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I think perhaps this is the only country in the history of the world where this is probably possible up to this point in time to have a bloodless revolution. Well, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying it is conceivable, because what we are talking about a revolution is a political revolution, and this is how you forestall violence, is through the political process, and people are not likely to do that. Revolution is a word that I'm trying to stay away from. It's in all our vocabulary, but again, it goes back to the description of reality and the existence of things, when you're talking about, I'm not sure we're talking about a revolution. I don't know what this thing is. It's real. Yeah, it's that. It's all of these. You could call it. You could use a reformation, revolution, and all this. But there are some, essential ingredients which makes this situation so different from all the things that we've pointed to in history in terms of what we would call revolution. This country really did more to bring out the fallacy in Marxist thinking about the working class, the socialist working class, bound to clash with the capitalists. Well, we know that ain't gonna happen. Not in this country. General Motors and AFL-CIO are not gonna clash. He couldn't foresee the impact of an highly industrialized society on human behavior. He just couldn't foresee that. That's a fallacy. That's what Marxism is the biggest error in his thinking. So we're not talking about a classical revolution. We're not talking about the revolutions that were carried out, all of them. Hillside or landside, the land countryside revolution. That is almost inconceivable in a country like this. What you're talking about, the revolutionary forces in this country in the main have no meaningful entree within the structure. The revolutionary forces in this country are minority, which, they're not popular, you see. And the issues they're raising are not broad issues. Most people don't plug into really what black people are talking about, or leftist students are talking about, or Mexicans or Indians or whoever it might be. People are, like, these people are black people, and we're talking about bread and butter. That's not a reality for most people. What the heck? As John Kenneth Garber said, that black people, he said, John Kenneth Garber, I think he makes a very cynical yet humorous statement, that is, since black people at least ought to have the good sense, if you must be born poor, you should have been born poor while everybody else was born poor, because it's rather difficult now, where most people are not poor. It's not real, 85% of the American people. So it's a minor issue. It's not the same way that the labor movement was. See, where you could cross racial lines, religious lines, cultural lines, everybody dug it, but it had mass appeal. But what black folks are talking about doesn't have mass appeal, even if it weren't for the profound religiosity of racism in society, people would still have a hard time relating to folks. Number one, they got the problem of not, people say use the system. Well, it's an impossibility for black people to use the system. They find outside of the system. The only kind of political oppression they could apply to the extent will be some kind of chaotic oppression. Impress the institution. They can't do it through the political process. Yeah, then they're out of it. You can't even get in it, in any serious way to become a part of the debate. So this is, the marching and the singing and later the things. These are political acts. They're legitimate political acts, but they're not.
Is it possible to create an institution that builds within itself the possibility of renewal? Is this possible?
Well, I suppose so. I don't know who would do it and how they would do it.
To me, this is a primary question because you could destroy every institution and then new ones would spring up and they could become corrupt very quickly too. But how is it possible to create a society where human values are so maximized that
hopefully, and we don't want to put man down altogether. He has made some progress. And some people have learned from experience, from history, and they find it very instructive. Now, I would think that, the whole question is one of human values, redefining some things about what the essence of the human purpose is. I would certainly think that people could deal more with kind of man-centered morality, a man-centered society. I think some people have learned some lessons in the past. We know that, this old man has done a tremendous thing with the physical environment. He's controlled and he's discovered the unknown, and I think materialism is here to stay. Now what else is new, about our existence? And that's the central question that has to be answered. How do we use the things that we already have under the kind of principle of having the greatest good for the greatest number of people? That is a problem, And our values say no. The values say, generally, that ain't supposed to be. You got the social myth of America, reinforcing every day about the Protestant ethic and how you're supposed to do. What kind of dues you're supposed to pay before you arrive. In fact, as a respected human being, and that's things like money. It's very important. People are respected by money, and I don't care what class you come from or what you do as a livelihood. We can see this contradiction every day. People who make money, and I don't care how you make it, whether you're Joe Valachi or whoever, you can enjoy this society. You can buy your dignity. There are exceptions to that, like old money. They kind of skew it. They don't allow anybody in. But in the main, if you can make some money, you can buy respectability. For most people, that's a value. We see it, a few years ago when they were having the investigation of the mafia. I remember one of these very exquisite suburbs of Detroit. There were about 5 black doctors, who tried to buy houses in that community. They cut all kind of hell while they couldn't buy. And one of the things they pointed out, people were talking about, this community morality and all that being lowered or whatever they talked about. Standards being low. And they were pointing out all the gangsters, around the corner. Well, so-and-so and Joe Valachi and Joe Spino and, all these cats, living right in your neighborhood. How could, I'm a doctor. How do you figure he's a better person than me, But that's the way the guy had the money. Ordinarily, they couldn't call him, even if they thought that, the gangsters who lived in that community, what they thought of him because they had as much money as they did. That's a very superficial, value for human beings to adhere to, but it's here, and people are going to have to deal with it, the meaning of money in our lives. What place does it have? Most of what we call education is based on that concept. It's really,
well, certainly it's very true, and this is one of the crucial things this college is struggling with. There are many people who should have access to, what we call education, and we have to determine the number on the basis of the money available, which is a really a non-human way of doing it.
No question about it. If what Heinrich really has said, the greatest equalizer of all men is what we are pleased to call, in quote, education. It's the balance wheel of all social machinery. That's the best way to get rid of a lot of social problems. Is through education. What we call education. Well, that's true. You know, that is so fundamental in any society. That the process of education tends to equalize people politically and economically. And as long as if people don't have access to it, you can't do a great deal about a number of the social, but you tend to reinforce, you see. And education, in this sense, has been a part, really, of creating a lot of social problems.
Augsburg College has 35 black applicants for next year's freshman class. If they only admit 6, you see.
Yeah. But it's you know, it's an economic factor. And that's, I agree with, you know, people who say, but we have to redefine what we mean by education, too. When I say education, I really, you know, I'm saying, man, if it's going to equalize people, that they should have the access to this, you know, the learning experience that could make people able and fit to function in society as human beings. You know, what you see. And I suppose many people, when they say education, particularly black people, they mean that everybody should go to school and you know, so they can get a good job. Well, that isn't quite what I mean. You know,
That equalizes to the dollar, doesn't it?
Yeah, back to the economics, and I'm talking about a human, you know, centered society, where it's very important to people to get education to learn how to live with one another. That's one of the functions of education, which it doesn't address it. If you have to learn how to live, you know, commence life in this society, and most of us are not prepared for it when we come out of school. It tends to increase differences in a negative way. And there's a positive way you can talk about differences too. It tends to point them out negatively. People, you know, the whole class business, if it wasn't for race, you probably have class would be much stronger point. Because if all people don't have access to the basic learning process, you know, understanding the society, this monster that we live in, what their relationship is to it, you know, help them with the whole question of identity, self-identity, identity as an individual, and you know, as a human being at large. You know, these are the questions education has to answer. They are fundamental questions. Not so much earning a living, but teaching people how to make a life for themselves. And that is not happening. And it hasn't happened. And perhaps it couldn't have happened, given the situation that we have, you know, practical intelligence and all, and maybe we couldn't even consider it up until this time. Up until the people, it was forced, the question has to be forced on people, institutionalized, before you deal with it.
But if you don't have that hope,
Sure.
Then you lose.
Yeah, well, like,
then there's only
that's my thing is that hope.
That this can be.
Hope is what's happening, man.
That's the only thing that keeps me in the ballgame.
If you don't have hope, I know what people, you know, there's reason to be pessimistic, then you might as well give it up. Yeah. I think that life itself sometimes has been based on hope. You know, a lot of times. And when you can't conceive of the best of all possible worlds, you know, no matter how bad the situation is, and I think that we all are people who claim to be trying to do something, ought to hang their hats up. If you don't believe that things can be better, you know, religious, you have to believe that. Too. Now, that isn't to say that people should be unmindful of how bad things are, and how terrible they're likely to get, even more.
And I don't mean the kind of hope with a pie in the sky by and by.
No, there is a possibility. There are some, you know, real things that, you know, little examples you can point to of hopeful examples.
When you think about it, it's really silly because you should have to pay for education.
Yeah.
Because it's important that everybody have it.
Sure.
And yet, this perpetuates the class structure.
See, but it's a likely possibility. That's one of the hopes that we will solve this question about education, about who has the right to be educated. It is conceivable to me in the next 10 or 12 years that will be a result where education, anybody who wants to go to school will probably be allowed to go. It's possible.
Well, it's to the benefit of
Yeah, it's to the benefit of the society, to everybody but the movers and shakers of society. See, they don't see it as being very beneficial. We don't want to an informed public. uh, you can't fool people. You see, and it's hard for organizations to function. Really, in an authority, when they have informed membership, you see that all the time. Membership, where does it always come from? The lower level, ideas and whatnot. And when you get informed membership, man, you got problems on your hands. That's the problem. So one of the things is to function of organizations is to take control of definitions of what is and descriptions, and be the authority on the existence of things. Whether or not these things we talk about exist, you should project images that make them exist. That is a real problem. There's very little that man has to do about saying, and science has proved about what exists in this world, because it exists before he's discovered it. And it's the only thing that people can deal with in terms of description of existence, in a way of pre-planning or some, and he can't totally deal with that, but it's like an engineer, designing a bridge. He can just give a description of existence before it happens. But even there are some elements, already there that, in nature that he can't describe because it's already there. But and every organization, you can look at governments and labor unions, or churches, or even social clubs. Everybody has a definition. It's a functional relation, sorority. The best people. Why? And fraternity. And that's the function of the leadership, man, is to get a hold of these precepts and influence, thought. And people reinforce it by their actions. They perpetuate myths and lies. It's comforting. It's not personal. You're not really lying. You're sacrificing for the benefit of the organization. You are unselfish, person. So you're not, guilty of lying. It's kind of lunatic element about that, but I think it's very true, and I think it's my whole belief about I believe this, provided a man is not a complete imbecile, that almost anybody can have some fundamental understanding of this world that he lives in. I believe that. Yeah.
I don't want to change the subject here, but I'd like to.
No, yes, you will. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd like to get out a question that's been in my mind for 3 or 4 minutes since you were talking about the subject just a few minutes ago. You said that education shouldn't be just a training to equip a person for jobs, but that it should be something to the life of the person and to make him more, give him this command of wisdom and this position of being able to name things with authority and work with others in this regard. And I, frankly, I think you have one of the best philosophies of liberal arts education that I've heard anywhere for a long, long time. I hope someday you are president of a college or you're in control of some kind of an educational institution.
That would be a terrible
thing. You can
thing.
realize some of this
institutional
philosophy
right.
of education.
Let the kids drink, do what they want to do.
Hey, I'm going to that school.
That's kind of a prologue to my question.
I was getting that mental picture.
But when you were talking about education in this sense, a question came up in my own mind as to how I work with students in my own classes. For many years now, I've been dealing with white students. Now, there's the new phenomenon of having black students in class. I really would like to be, I'd like to be fair to the new reality. Just today, we finished a unit in Introduction to Theology, in which we studied briefly the influence of Neoplatonism on Origen's theology and the influence which this has on the Christological controversies and then the Nicene Creed which emerged and the Chalcedonian Creed which emerged, some of these creeds which are definitive statements in Western Christendom. I don't know how one would want to assess this, an episode in the history of Western thought or history of Western culture or something like that. At its best, that's the way I'd like to think about it. That is, we studied an episode in the history of Western culture. But it's terribly abstract. And I've heard that black students have difficulty relating to abstractions of this kind. I'd like to have you respond to this, and I'd like to ask you. My objective has been to try to teach white students the origin and the meaning of some of these crusty old symbols that we still find in the culture. And so in a sense, I consider my role to help introduce them to some of these things that are boggling around in the culture. And am I right in also wanting to introduce the black student who might have even more difficulty with abstractions, wanting also to introduce him to these things in the culture?
Yeah, well, I admire your posture. I think that's good. I think generally, this thing has been overplayed about black students not being able to relate to the abstract. I think there's a lot of truth to that. But it's general. I think that's white students too. Matter of fact, it's, the intelligence level of people in the society in general is a pragmatic kind of intelligence. It's a practical intelligence. We are not long-range, value-oriented thinkers as a people. I mean, this is the success of America. It probably would turn out quite differently if it weren't. Now, I know there are people in the society who deal and understand the abstract, understand the abstract. Well, I think abstractions, and somewhere or other, you have to be able to plug abstractions into some reality experience, some real experience of people's, culture. I think the experience of Europe, points this out. That the mass of people never was able to deal with the abstract. But they were able, there was some vehicles in which people could translate certain things that they could plug into their culture. You understand? It's questionable whether Charlemagne understood the abstract. He could read, he could write. But look, there's many, and yet he was a great Christian, and he did a lot to, and probably the people who accounted for the success of Christianity are not the people who understood it in the abstract. They understood it in a nationalistic sense. People after they became, Charlemagne is a classic illustration. There are many others, who
started cathedral schools in which, even though he wasn't very schooled himself, he established cathedral schools which represented
tremendous emotional relationship, and that's very important. And that's what people fail to realize, and I think in human life, particularly where black people are concerned, is they don't respect emotional life, the emotional experience of people. Again, because it's in this society kind of anti-emotional, but emotions are necessarily bad, supposedly, and I don't think so. I think it's to understand. I think that white people have an emotional life which is more tranquil in black people at this point in the way, is more passionate. We have to understand these emotions, you know, and they must be real to all educators. They're nevertheless emotions, you know, and we don't respect that. You see, one must begin to, I think, respect and understand something about the experience, the peculiar experience of any people before you begin to deal with abstraction. You know, they just can't plug in so readily when nothing you've been not able to get that abstraction and do it. You know, and like Christianity, you know, black people deal with abstraction, but a different kind. You know, it's not so much the ecclesiastical, you know, theological concepts, you know, on that plane that they deal with. They certainly deal with abstraction. I think there's tremendous imagery in black folklore. It's fantastic, you know, particularly out of religion. And it was certainly abstract. A lot of folk tradition of black people.
Well, what I think I'm dealing with is the imagery of Greek and Latin and basically white Western civilization. Am I fair in requiring black students to become familiar with these images?
Oh yeah. I think I don't think we ought to say that it's necessarily a model to emulate. I think it's a part of the real world. And Greek and Western thought is, you know, one very important aspect of human experience, which we all should understand. But I think there should be, you know, some mutual respect, some reciprocity. I think black students, it's very important to be, I think, a human being for me to understand something about Western thought. You know, I think it's equally as important for me to understand something about Oriental thought, right? Or African or what have you. You see, I think that's the new thing for the educator to plug into. As long as you deal with it, you know, like this is the avenue that you should aspire to. I think it could be complementary. You know, but you have to say other things besides just Western thought. You know, concepts of Western value.
Well, a person has to start out from the basic feeling, though, that there isn't one ultimate cultural way of affirming something, but there are mutually satisfying.
No question. The universality that you can deal with. You know.
And that the more of these you plug into, say, an educational environment, the richer it becomes. Mm-hmm.
And I would think that what educators could focus on is a lot more of the function of things rather than the structure of it, in the universal sense. I think these are common denominators, you know, like dealing with the whole question of human culture, human ways of life. We deal more with the fundamental things that I call universality, you know, the function of things, the religion, of art, and even politics in people's lives. It is only the structure that is different. You know, I'm sure you know that. But we don't emphasize that. You know, we say this is the way it is, and this is, you know, we get all hung up on things like art, man. It caused a cat like James Baldwin. Let me show you. I think as bright as he is, as much perception as he's offered us, is the whole problem. But one of the statements he made in his novel, it was in a book of essays. He was talking about he had to leave this country, you know, lived in kind of an expatriate for about 9 or 10 years. And when he woke up suddenly one morning and discovered that he hated white people, it was not so much that he loved black people, because the fact is that he said he hated them even worse, and perhaps because they had never produced a Rembrandt. He had, you know, had no understanding of the universality of art. That was only one concept of, you know, the aesthetic. And Western, you know, that's before he, you know, went to Paris and understood, you know, things about, you know, Picasso and the African art and this kind of stuff. You know, people, he had no, you know, that kind of surprised me. That even he couldn't conceive of art being universal and diverse, and what beauty was, you know, the aesthetic was in people's lives. He didn't see it. Because like most of us, art is now something, you know, it's supposed to be in a museum. You know, it's supposed to be something esoteric, understood by a few folk. That isn't what art has always meant. Indeed, that isn't what it perhaps at bottom ever meant. You know, he couldn't conceive of collective art, what people's art, which is basically the way art has been for most people. And when you talk about art for art's sake, I think most people come out and say that, and it suggests sterility. That's what it suggests. Because the Europeans were creating great art in the Renaissance. It's part of the life experience of people. It was not indeed in museums in the sense that we think of it now. I think all these things, I just think that it should be a real challenge for educators to be creative. And I think one of the tasks of education is to take previously unrelated things and create new forms. That's, I think, a basic function of education. And to deal with, the whole of human experience and look at it as being instructive. This is new. Probably we couldn't even talk about this until this point in human history. Probably been impossible. Men, the kind of world that we live in, we've just found out what the world looks like. Yesterday, what people look like. McLuhan is called a global village now. So this is the way you got to look at it in the future. This whole thing of nationalism, which is the strongest force in human life, that might have to be challenged. I think it should be challenged. There are a lot of people who think kind of cosmopolitan in their view, and I think that more and more people growing to that view who will be anti-nationalist. And anti-nationalism will express itself through challenging government. Whether it's communist or socialist or capitalist, people will challenge. You can see seeds of this already, I think. Particularly with young people. It's a universal phenomenon. It's not just in America. Russia's in for a lot of trouble. There's no question about it. She's going to the next 5 years. It's got to explode in Russia, man. With the instant one. Oh, it's got to explode. Russia made a great mistake by tampering with what I think is a very important part of the human experience, and that is this whole business about being anti-spiritual. I think that's dangerous to tamper with people's spiritual life, whether they're religious or not. And I think that there's going to be, a counter move over there.
50 youth were just arrested for not showing proper reverence to the flag.
Was that right?
Yeah,
How recent?
This week in Russia.
Is that right? Yeah. Oh, it's got to happen. People are becoming anti-nationalistic. Some people. Yeah.
I just wanted to back something that I read a while ago when you said that black people are not as emotional as black people.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh.
No, I described emotion as passionate and tranquil. There's no way to equate or to judge them. I just think that people, according to their experience, express their emotion in different ways.
Yeah.
But it's no less powerful, it's no less forceful, it's no less meaningful. I think white people have very strong emotional life. They're very emotional people, but different in expressing it. Very emotional people, white people, are probably far more emotional in some respects than black people. But we attend emotion. Yeah, we when we say emotion, generally we're talking about overt instead of covert. We're talking about things that we can physically, black people just do not conceal emotions. It means they're any more emotional. We can only identify with one kind of emotion, that's the passionate kind. But I think that anybody who's visited certain parts of this country knows that white people are extremely emotional, very unbelievably emotional, much less philosophical than black people. And so philosophical, not in the sense that any philosopher would mean, but head bloody but unbowed,
More pragmatic.
I don't know if it's pragmatic in the sense that I use, but just we'll grin and bear it. We'll go along with it. They're less emotional in this sense. Very philosophical. White people couldn't, given this experience you have in America, couldn't tolerate that kind of stuff. Head bloody, but how does that thing go? Bowed but bloody or something. Yeah. But that's the thing about black people. Until very recently, they prided themselves in being cool. That's what they call it, under fire. White folks don't put up with that.
I think white people can get very emotional over abstractions. And a
All
lot
right, I'll
of
buy that.
the abstract ideas are really people's strong feelings that are sort of distilled.
That's true.
And I don't think black people get that worked up over abstractions.
Right.
That's part of it.
And their emotions are a lot of, expressions rather concrete experience.
Yeah.
No conceptions, about, what I think, what I, I know it.
Well, a person who is hungry physically can get very angry over the fact that he knows he's hungry, where most of us haven't been hungry.
That's right. And
You can get very angry over the statistic that 2/3 of the
Right.
kids go to bed.
That's what I
every night
mean. Tranquil
hungry,
emotion.
yeah.
It's bad. I'm sure some people react emotionally to a lot of things they see that they don't like, white people, but on a different level. Totally different level. They intellectualize it a great deal more, and, kind of have control of the situation because of that social distance. And you can deal with it a little better. Somebody who's involved in it, it's very hard to ask a person to be rational when they're in an irrational situation, as far as they see it. They tend to behave irrationally.
In defense of thievery, that statement just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
If a man's family is hungry and there's no money,
Yeah.
then you steal.
Well, this happens every day. People come to my people that, and I know people like that, man. So what? All I gotta do something, man. Quick. Just we might say, well, that doesn't make sense. But to them it does. There's no other way for me to get some bread. And rather than suffer the humiliations and indignities and whatnot, I'm going around to this grocery store and tell that man up against the wall. Up against the wall. You won't think nothing about it. It's the way it is, not criminal.
Carrying on this hunger theme, just a while ago, I read in this magazine that they were sending in FBI agents to scare the people that had composed these hunger reports.
Oh, they all over.
They were scaring them into, withdrawing their reports and revealing all this hunger. I mean, how long is this going to go on? I mean, how long are we going to let it go?
But the FBI is a very interesting people. I mean, they're all over now. These poverty programs and
I know.
they're all over Minneapolis. Funny thing about the FBI, everybody knows who they are. They're most obvious people. They're around. And that's intimidating. This is but I don't think people are as afraid. I think I noticed this too, as they used to be, of that kind of authority. I had an experience about a year ago with some FBI people. I didn't think serious. I think they were just doing their job, checking up on who's who, and had a very nice conversation with them. Talked to the guys about 2 hours, about, we were playing tricks with one another, of course. But the point is, and it just dawned on me that, and the minute they came up, these are some strange guys. There must be something. And you go, not even a bit upset about it. You're like, I'm sure if that would have happened, 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of people, FBI, well, gee, what are they, But, anybody, they got computerized people and this kind of stuff all over the country. People know, they stop, I want to talk to you, I want to know, what's happening. Happens every day, But the thing of it is, the FBI were they weren't the least bit, I felt, the least bit threatened by them, because their behavior probably was more predictable than mine. So, that's a new phenomenon that we are having to deal with in this country. I would, hope that, things that educational institutions can do is something in this area. This is very kind of in left field, the kind of thing that we had here in the past 8 weeks or so. But I think it has merit in that if it certainly cannot be, some way interdepartmental or whatever you call it, there has to be some kind of course, I think, in schools where people can talk about just these such things in depth. And I'm talking about the whole question of our situation today: definitions, interpretations, frames, and references.
Across every area
We need to focus on, human life. We need to give a great deal of attention to the experiences that we're undergoing right now. Boy, it's a great opportunity for educators in this area. There's no question about it. To deal with, there's a whole lot really happening right now. A whole lot of important things, questions being raised that are essential and important about human experience. A lot of contradictions. And people got to plug into this. I mean, education cannot hold itself aloof and say it's not legit, it's not important because it's not quite in the textbook yet. That has to be dealt with. And I would hope that, I know some schools are doing this, trying to do something about this and make it a part of the educational experience of people. So at least they would have some basic frame of reference and understanding. And that is one of the things that has hurt the situation in this country and the movements in this country. People, a lot of people were involved emotionally without having very much understanding about what they were dealing with. And when these contradictions, which exist in their lives were raised, man, blew minds. People couldn't deal with it because they really had no frame of reference. That goes for most white persons in the civil rights movement. White people, some white people, they've been to the South a couple of times, were very upset about black people's involvement in the civil rights movement. What are you doing here? The old statement, it was a hell of a lot of fun before these black folks got in. So that's just completely out of whack with reality. We have all these problems about leadership positions in the civil rights movement. I'm sure some of you remember that. Who should be the leader? Who should define the strategy? Who should define the goals? All these problems. See, if people had known more and had some historic definition for this situation, I'm not saying no problem would have arisen, but I'm sure they would have been minimized. I think people would have gone in with a different frame of mind. A lot of white people said it would have been a lot more philosophical about it. Well, look, I'm not helping you. I'm really helping myself. Because if you understand really human motivation, it is really selfish. I try to convince myself that I'm altruistic. But again, that's a kind of a self-deception. I'm selfish. The only reason why I do what I do is because I'm me. And I see what's happening as an extension of me. I just, what people about race, it's not really altruism. It's me. I don't want it to happen to me. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be this. This is what it's all about. It's me. It's not unselfish. And I think the more we admit these kinds of things, the white persons, I think, should not say I'm selfish. I'm concerned about me, and I see what you're all about as an extension of me. If it could happen to you, it could probably happen to me in some other form.
But don't some people identify with other people more? Some people are completely selfish. They don't or it's a matter of degree. They don't identify with other people. They don't identify with black people.
Yeah, well, I don't mean that kind of selfishness. I thought I was kind of perverting the word, to say that a lot of what we conceive of as unselfish acts on the part of people are not so much unselfish. Like idealism. I think that people move out of some personal motivation a lot of times. Out of some deep
and not completely other directed, but
yeah.
I directed.
Yeah. They see themselves as a part of a much bigger world than we ordinarily do. I think, that's the way. I don't think anything could happen seriously in this country affecting people that will not affect me indirectly. I know that much. I've done nothing. It will not affect me. I don't care if people are white or black. Yeah, but the obvious group is black people. Will be directly affected. But I think anything that happens to white people will affect me indirectly. There's no question about it. Suppose they had a watermark. I'm affected, man. Anything that happens to white people, and that's the contradiction in human life. It's inextricably interwoven one with the other. We tend to focus on particulars instead of the complex whole of what makes up the whole. And I think it's natural.
This is one of the geniuses of King's, the way he interwove things together.
Yeah. That was, right. He was able to do that, to interrelate the whole struggle to an essential thing of human affirmation. What he really tried to do, which became very, very dangerous. Because you tend to, let's face it, the last thing some people want to see among people in this country is unity on any level, whether it's political, social, economic, or otherwise. They can't stand that because what the hell am I going to be doing next year? Unity among people. So we have people fighting unity. It becomes very dangerous when people are able to develop some kind of philosophy which transcend things like race and culture and religions and stuff like this. The forces are strongly against that kind of stuff. And you're going to always meet opposition. And that has always been the case. Movements have always brought the gospel. It's supposed to be better for everybody. And it's very threatening to the existing social order. Very threatening. Because the way people view what life is and our values. I think, now it's obvious that I think, I was talking to somebody earlier, things got to be more chaotic. I mean, it's going to get more chaotic. Before. It's not.
I think so.
It has to. I think the political question will become a lot more explosive. Yeah. See, my contention is that we're in the last phase of what we call a social revolution now. There's a realignment of people's relationship in terms of how they relate to one another in this country. I don't think the black-white relationship will ever be the same. Like it was. I don't think the subordinate, superior relationship will ever be the same socially. It will never be the same, whether it's in Georgia, California, or New York. Now we're going into the political arena, which is where the focus of the struggle is now. And of course, if you're looking at an evolutionary process in terms of evolving into revolution, behind politics comes the extension of politics, which is a violent disruption. It's just natural. Now, violent disruptions have already occurred. I'm talking about disruptions that would make Watts look like a picnic. You'd be happy to see Watts. Wouldn't be anything, but meaningful disruptions where a major political faction will be involved. I think that's a likely possibility. And John Adams claimed that that's supposed to signify the last phase of revolution. Is a violent disruption. Is the last convulsion. That's it. Now, when the revolution starts, of course, change over. After all this, the basic fundamental revolution. Like, what have you got going for you that you disrupted, that this is no longer the case? That's the real challenge. What are you going to build, as you alluded to earlier? That would be the real challenge for black people. You see, if we're not, I don't think, revolutionary. I'm not saying we're black people. I think all poor people, black white, are potential revolutionaries. All oppressed people are potential revolutionaries. But people become revolutionaries when they kind of sense, when they're less oppressed, they become more and more revolutionary. And black people have some very special problems about values and double consciousness of being Negro and American at the same time, which makes them basically reformists rather than revolutionary. So my prediction is the revolutionary element in this country is not black but white, who can go on sociologically at another level and deal with some of the more fundamental values, not open housing. That's not a question. That's a superficial question. The fundamental question is not housing but land. What would be great?
What's the percentage of black ownership of land in this country?
None. I don't even know. It's got to be less than 1%.
It's less than 1%.
Yeah, if people only occupy 13%, I guess it's less than 1%. The whole mass American population only deal with about 12 or 13% of land. So that's always been a problem. That would be a revolutionary posture. Instead of talking about land, which is the basis of all independence. All revolutions have been based on land. And we're not, and people aren't even, black people's thing of white people are very limited. The fact of the matter is they don't want much. it's true. They just don't want much. I don't think a house, and a car, and a land, that ain't really, what revolution are. They are really value centered, man. They value oriented. You talk about profound questions affecting human life. Blacks in the main. I'm talking about not the intellectual these people. It's basically like college students. They are very beneficial, I think, to white colleges, black students. I know it's hard for the presidents at this time to see that, but they're one of the saving graces. I mean, one of the real pluses, because they're really not talking about anything out of context. It's saying, okay, I want N kind. This is what they're saying. It's very limited. You fix it up, and everything is kosher. Well, that ain't what I don't know what some white students are talking about, but that's not what they're talking about. Black students are really an asset, and I don't know how white administrations understand this.
You read one set of demands after another from black students, they're very positive.
Sure they are.
They're not get rid of the institution, they're infused into the institution.
They want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
That's all it is. I don't call that revolution, because it's not fundamental. And as I said before, I'm not sure we're talking about revolution in the classical sense of the word. Maybe something that Fanon called rebirth.
As I sense it, as I listen and hear it, the experiences I have, the white radical thinking has been spawned out of the broken upper middle class white home.
Yeah. And the contradiction in the life of middle class whites.
The contradictions. Two-thirds of the white youth in Berkeley come from other places in broken homes.
Yeah, in Stanford and places like that. So they see and the thing is, I don't want to, I'm not one to put the white radical down. I think that.
I'm not putting them down.
I know. Yeah, I'm just saying, a lot of people tend, when you talk about it, that a lot of these people know what they're talking about. I don't think they all are idealists. Everybody, you got flag wavers and anything, but I think that they really are raising some, I think some of them are godsend. Some very important questions for human beings. And they're probably the only people in this country who are in a position to do it. No other element can do it but them. To deal with, the whole question of the extension of liberal thought in America. Few people realize that America, its foundation is an extension of European liberal thought. There's nothing conservative about it. The basis of it is that, of these 1,000-year struggle, that people developed in Europe, against stagnation, against reactionary, what you call conservatism. And that's a logical extension of it. Jefferson, the likes of Jefferson and James Otis and these people had a profound understanding of this whole continuum and put it together and lock these common people in with that idea which we don't understand. Because they gave the idea, which is fantastic, but the practical life of America contradicted America's ideals. And that's the central problem facing white Americans, is that whole question of professed ideals and pragmatic reality, which is where the white radical has come into being. About the whole thing of he's trying to make, in some sense, make a living reality all of these things about the human personality. That's what the Constitution is all about, right? The essence of it, the protection of the human being, center of gravity. The individual, sure, the majority, should rule, but you must protect the rights of the minority. That's very essential. Real questions that people have all lived with, for all these generations, and just talked about, waxed and waned about, but never seriously, never religiously try to do anything about it in a serious way. Now, I think that these students have a lot of shortcomings. I think one of the obvious ones is they're a campus center, and I think number one is they're talking about the revolutionary. They can't do it without potential revolutionaries who are in these communities, who are poor people. and they don't have any profound relationship with poor people. You know, I would be convinced that they're really beginning to grow and develop when I see some of these radicals sitting in these welfare offices and going to these slaughterhouses called General Hospital to link up with poor with people they profess to be. Some of them express, they're trying to liberate people. But there's no connection between their campus centers, almost all black and white students. They're campus oriented. They think the campus is the center of the thing. That's not true. They don't have any relationship, no real relationship. I mean, tutorial program. That's not what I'm talking about. They come to help. But I mean, the viable, rapport with people in the community. They do not have it. Pardon?
Since Western universities have begun, about the 11th century, Augsburg, Paris, and all those.
Yeah.
Ever since then, and I believe African and many of the Asiatic universities now are pretty much on Western principles from conquest and so on. Universities have been that way ever since they began about 800 years ago.
You mean?
Modern universities. Every students have believed it's been campus-centered. Profs have believed it.
Yeah.
The whole, all three levels of universities and colleges have believed this for 800 years.
Right.
Are you going to change that?
Yeah, what I'm saying, again, the reality is there for them to deal with it. Again, it's probably because, we're talking about descriptions of things that 800-year experience, they're dealing with that experience, that language that grew out of that experience, and the new reality is not the same. I think the real creative forces really are outside of university. Outside of university. And, really the thrust of the student movement, insofar as it has any ideology, the development grew outside of university campuses. See, students imported a lot of things to campus, like Berkeley, places like that. They imported these, the argument. They got a lot of course, practical experience. Many of them out of the civil rights movement, but it's they don't link. There's no reciprocity between campus and community. And maybe this is what makes Hayakawa and those kind of people look good when he talks about a certain element. They're not sure what they want, but they don't want what anybody else wants. So they tend to exploit every faction to their own end.
Do you think that black people can really come into an institution unless it's radically changed, profoundly changed?
No. I think the presence of black people, it's just natural chemistry. We'll radicalize to come in. Well, not radicalize. We certainly will do something like reform. I don't think we can radicalize, but change. Their presence. Change is reality of a college campus. It just changed. Augsburg will never be the same. After 10. Yeah. No, nobody. And it just, that's the cultural clash, the whole thing, man. And it's not anything necessarily political about it. It's interpreted politically. But it's just that the people, different experience, it just tends to change the whole reality of the situation. This like, traditionally, historically, there's always been a black student or 2 or 3 or 4. I don't want any college campus, outside of society. But he was a conventional, accessory. He was supposed to be there. But now you've got a different type of student who comes out of a real life experience situation, not the sheltered black student, which is always coming to these schools. It's different. He's a product of his culture. He is less marginal than the preceding college student. He's just less marginal. He just comes with a lot of values and a lot of things. I think this is good for the student body, but for the administration or the faculty at least to really be able to understand and deal with this chemistry. Because it could be plus. Lots. And another thing about black people, and I think I can get away with it. I think is important in their experience. Is that whether the situation is political or not, any effort they make to create an environment which would meet their needs has a kind of spinning off value, salutary effect for other people. It just seems to have that. You see that very clearly in doing civil rights. Where you raise issues, out of your own experience, but other people can see, some things in political senses and whatnot. And it is a real value to people who are that perceptive. Wow, yeah, this is another dimension, another way to look at it, another way to do it. I think one of the tragedies with facing universities, particularly states, I don't know about this, is the fact that I think reactionary forces are going to do as much as they can to keep black students from coming
or to restrict the educational environment. Like the two new regents elected to the state board of regents here at university are much more to the right than the two men they replaced.
Right. And, the whole thing about what is this, tuition at the university, I think about 24 states. And it's coincidental, these are states where some college campus, state school, that you had some political activity. So it really means, to keep it the same way, certain elements coming into school.
This timed exactly in California.
Yeah.
The Reagan thrust for the tuition.
Sure. And that's a trend, that's a national trend. Because people are going, at this point in time, with all these contradictions, so graphic, they will tend to politicize the situation whether they want to or not, by simply asking questions. That's the problem. Well, I'd like to say I've enjoyed this. I think that
we appreciate it very much.
Yeah,
I'd like to
you
thank
guys.
you, Mel.
Right.
And we hope this can be an increasing